quite like this one. Any product that's actually physically large enough for me to hide behind if it's not going terribly well, we should do more of these. Hello and welcome to an AVForums short video overview of the Luxman L-509Z Integrated Amplifier. My name is Ed Selley, I'm the Hi-Fi Editor for AVForums. I've been churning out a small number of these reviews over the last few months with varying degrees of success. We're going to keep at it. Hopefully there is a slow and torturous progression in the right direction into what we're looking for and what we're trying to get out of these things. But as ever, there will be a written review on the site that accompanies this video. It's a very long written review actually. It's a whisker under 3,000 words because there's quite a lot to talk about with this. But that review contains my ideas in a more logical and linear fashion. I'm still better at writing than I am presenting, so I do urge you, if you have the time and inclination to do so, to read the written review as well as look at the video. Anyway, let's crack on with this. The L509Z replaces the L509X. It is the flagship Luxman integrated amplifier, and in the UK it's yours for a brisk £11,000. Now that is a lot of money. It's not the most expensive amplifier we've ever tested on AVForums, but the amplifier that beat it in that regard, the Macintosh MA8950, had a full range of digital inputs on the back of it, so it needed very little in the way of source equipment. As we shall cover, that is not the case with the Luxman. So, by and large, in terms of the equipment it would need to work with, this is it. This is the most expensive amplifier that we've ever tested. And the reasons for that are sufficiently intriguing that there's actually a podcast that loosely accompanies this video where we discussed the nature of the high end, what matters to you when we discuss the high end, and how much you'd be prepared to pay for it, because this amplifier in its own way is a manifestation of things that you might be very excited about or you might not give two hoots about. So let's talk about those things. First up, this is powerful but not volcanically so. Luxman quotes 120 watts into 8 ohms and, depending on whether you're looking at their site or the press material, between 220 and 240 watts, I should say. Watts, not volts. That's what it runs on. Into 4 ohms. Now, a couple of points about this. The first is that Luxman quotes a THD figure of 0.004% for that 120 watt figure. Now, you don't need to be too invested in the numbers to know that basically that's bugger all. To all intents and purposes, there is no distortion involved. The second is that previous experience with Luxman integrated amplifiers suggests that Luxman does tend to understate how much power these things actually generate. The last time a Luxman amplifier I was reviewing was actually benched by an engineer who knew what they were doing, it exceeded its stated power figure by roughly 100%. So you can work on the principle that there should be sufficient power for everything except running the main stage at Glastonbury from this amplifier. More to the point, the amplifier in question is an absolute smorgasbord of acronyms. Luxman loves acronyms, absolutely goes wild for them. So I've picked out a few of them. There are more, but the main ones that matter. First of all is an acronym called ODNF, Only Distortion Negative Feedback. Basically, Luxman amplifiers run without feedback almost all of the time. They only apply feedback to the circuit when they find distortion on the circuit. Now, as we've discussed, there is very little in the way of distortion. So unless you are treating this thing with the mechanical sympathy of a toddler, it's fairly likely that you're not going to be triggering these systems. Just in case you do, there is a new system for the L509Z called LIFES, Luxman Integrated Feedback Engine System, which controls the application of this ODNF circuit. There are 2 separate modules and they monitor both the pre and the power amp stage. So to all intents and purposes, not only with ODNF not appearing that often, it's going to appear even less on this and appear with almost surgical precision as and when it is required. Around the front, you'll also find that the volume control has changed. Historically, Luxman amps had a more conventional Alps potentiometer. It had a start and a finish point and an indicator on the volume knob told you where your volume was. This has switched to a rotary encoder which moves through 88 fixed resistor steps, and these will appear on a little red indicator between the two VU meters. There is a video segment of that happening, so hopefully it's been located somewhere in the video. 88 steps. There's a huge amount of argument about the number of steps that are required for a volume control to feel completely linear and not go up in steps and so on and so forth. I can assure you that in practical use with this amplifier, 88 is enough. I haven't even had the slightest inkling that the volume is going up in anything other than a non-linear fashion. More to the point, it's really quite clever. If you move the volume very, very slowly and very gently, it goes up very, very slowly and very gently. If you suddenly decide that you want absolutely everything this amplifier's got to give and you yank the circuit, well, don't physically yank it, that's not a good idea. But if you physically twist it very quickly, it ramps up exceptionally quickly. It is, to all intents and purposes, exactly the same in feel as having a conventional volume pot, but Luxman claims that the performance is significantly improved. It's worth pointing out that almost every aspect of how this amplifier has been designed and built is about finding incremental gains. And how much these gains will matter to you will come down to where you sit in terms of how much is enough. There is a list of quite remarkable lengths that this company goes to in building this amplifier. It has peel coat circuit boards, so they're not green in the most part where it matters. They don't have a coating because Luxman feels that the coating has a measurable effect on performance. The wiring internally in key areas doesn't go round 90-degree bends, it doesn't make sharp turns. It follows point-to-point wiring principles with gentle curves. Luxman calls it beeline wiring because it makes a beeline for where it needs to be. Their argument is that it's not an enormous gain in performance, but it's a gain in performance, so therefore in this amplifier it's present. Around the back at the speaker terminal point, you'll find extremely large internal gauge wiring with low resistance relays. It's all about maintaining the damping factor and ensuring that the path to actually driving the speakers is as smooth and simplified as it can possibly be. This amplifier is a monument to obsessive attention to detail, and all of that costs. There's no getting around it. Equally, there are some new features as well. In addition to the internal LIFES modules and so on and so forth, Luxman has modified the phono stage, which has always been a big selling point on these amplifiers. The phono stage in all Luxman amplifiers, even the ones that near terrestrial price points, has never been a convenience feature. The company is very, very hopeful that you will use it and you will use it for serious vinyl playback. To help with this, the 509Z has 3 settings as opposed to 2. There is a conventional moving magnet setting, but the moving coil setting has been split into high and low cartridge settings to make it simpler to match with cartridges that have that slightly awkward output from about 1 millivolt upwards. It's a useful thing, especially as there's more and more of these cartridges doing the rounds. Additionally, you will find an extra tone control for the mid-range. So as well as bass and treble, there's now a mid-range control. This operates at roughly 700 Hertz. It's not the same as the Macintosh's 5-band system or 8-band system. It's not quite the same sort of level of EQ, but it does help tweak the performance of speakers in room. And if you have no desire to go anywhere near it, you can of course switch them out of the circuit. Also new is the fact that there are 2 headphone sockets. You can see them lurking. There is a 6.35 1/4-inch jack connection, single-ended, the classic, and next to that is a 4.4mm Pentacon balanced connection because the amplifier is balanced. So you can use it now for headphones, which is a useful thing as more and more headphones support this. And even if your headphone has an XLR connection, be it single 4-pin or 2 3-pin, the adapters are available to make sure that you can use this connection for that purpose. In other words, the idea is that this amplifier can be used the way that you choose it to be used, not your sort of you fitting your life around it. This has been a very big part of Luxman going back to, well, the 60s and 70s really, and it's slightly at odds with this sort of European high-end ideal which sort of prides itself on minimalism, but it does make a degree of sense once you've spent some time with it. I'm going to pause the video at this point because turning this amplifier around to discuss the back panel is not the work of a moment, and I'm not going to do it live on camera and humiliate myself, so I shall be back in a moment. Right then, back panel. As you can see, the most significant thing about this is what isn't present on the back panel. Unlike a number of integrated amplifiers doing the rounds at this price point, this is an exclusively analog only product. Luxman makes digital sources, it makes some excellent digital sources. As it stands, it doesn't seem to have any interest whatsoever in combining those two disciplines. And it's worth pointing out that underneath this absolutely immaculate top panel with its laser cut bits and bobs, it's pretty full in there. It would require a fair bit of work to cram a digital board in. In terms of analog connectivity though, the news is pretty good. We've got the phono stage, 4 line RCA inputs, 2 of which are on hefty sockets. How much of a difference you think that might make is entirely up to you, but they are at least easy to recognise when you're leaning over the back of the amplifier. So that's welcome. 2 balanced inputs, 2 pre-outs and a main input, so you can use the amplifier as a power amp in an AV system if you saw fit and wanted to. And what's more, it wouldn't affect the operation of the amplifier under any other circumstances. You're not pulling a brake bar to split those 2 sections off. At the bottom you will find very, very substantial speaker terminals, and there are A and B speaker sets. These can be switched between independently on the front panel. You can turn them off and run the amplifier as a preamp. It's all well specified and very thorough, and you can connect a lot of items to it, but it bears repeating that if you've spent £11,000 on this amplifier, you're going to need to have already spent something on sources for it. It's going to do nothing on its own. It can have a turntable connected directly, which is a saving in itself over line only input amplifiers, but no, you need extra stuff for your 11 grand to actually do anything meaningful. Around the back, it's worth pointing out that just again, the way that this thing is built is some way beyond even the sort of normally expensive things that pass through. The previous video that I did for the Hi-Fi Rose RA280, that's a £3,000 amplifier, and it is immaculately built for £3,000. I would argue probably the best built £3,000 amplifier I've tested in a very, very long time. It really feels like a Kit Kat wrapper compared to this thing. I can attest to having moved this thing around. Just the nature of how everything has been done is quite extraordinary. As I settle gracelessly into middle age, there is the idea that I can buy something and it might realistically be the last one of them that I'd ever buy. There's no ambiguity with this thing. If I chose to, and I had £11,000, we'll cover that in a bit, this would last me, I mean, even if I was healthier and active and, you know, had perhaps half as long to go again, this will last that long. There's no question in my mind. It is built at a standard which really, really does sort of put a line in the sand for what you can expect at this sort of price point. Okay, sound quality. There's an elephant in the room with sound quality and a product like this. As we've already covered, distortion is the square root of bugger all. I can I'd be astonished if you put this thing on a bench and determined any notional sense of personality to it whatsoever. Personality being, I suppose, shorthand for flaws. It is designed to be admirably transparent. Now, because it's designed to be admirably transparent, broadly speaking, the whole idea is that it doesn't have much in the way of identifiable character of its own. This is true up to a point. If you're looking for coloration, no, it doesn't really do that. However, the nature of how it works does inject a degree of character, and for the most part the nature of that character is extremely likeable. Going back to those power figures, this house is not an enormous one. I have a long-suffering neighbour at the other end. I will say that absolutely nothing I've tried when she's out has suggested that this is anything other than a biblically powerful amplifier, and that effortless heft does make itself felt. When you have dynamic peaks in music, sudden moments where we go from quiet to loud, just the effortlessness with which this responds, takes the reference Kudos Titan 505, which lives here, which is not an insensitive speaker, but thanks to the isobaric driver layout and other things, it's just extraordinary. There's no perception of strain or stress or indeed any form of mechanical process going on at all. It just takes the speaker and drives it to any level that you could realistically ask for at without any determinable sense of strain. It's very realistically possible to argue that you can achieve that for less than £11,000. I don't doubt that you can. We'll cover the mechanics of how much that might mean to you at the end, but there's no sense of compromise or any perception that any of the curious decisions, you know, the weird wiring decisions and unvarnished circuit boards, it's not for show. However small a difference you might think it makes, they've done it because they feel that it does something. So everything here is for a reason, and it's an exceptionally uncoloured amplifier. Now this extends to the phono stage as well. If you play by its rules, and we'll cover that in a moment, broadly speaking it's just an extension of the rest of the 509Z. So if you like what the amplifier does, and you like what your turntable does, and I'm rather hoping you like what your turntable does because you bought it, it's essentially being able to attach a source with which you are already delighted to a device which is going to do nothing to change the character of that source. This applies to the digital as well, but that's a more normal state of affairs. The phono stage is extraordinarily uncoloured. It's not perfect. Luxman doesn't allow for the impedance settings of the phono stage to be adjusted. That's not uncommon amongst Japanese manufacturers. They tend to hover around 100 ohms impedance for the phono stage. Now, across testing, cartridges which are set up to work happily near that 100 ohms setting, that's been fine. That's not been a problem at all. The Resident Vertair has a cartridge which wants 10 times that impedance figure. If you connect that, things don't sound quite as happy as they do with more sort of accepting cartridges. So you will need, if you want to set everything up to work optimally, you're going to have to make a decision on the cartridge that you choose and try and play nice with the Luxman's phono stage settings. But the different gain alterations, that's very, very useful, and the performance is exceptional. I would also go so far as to say that regardless of whether we're talking about a standalone unit or a device built into a larger amplifier, this is also one of the very best headphone amplifiers I've ever tested. Normally the combination of vinyl and headphones is one I dislike, combination of gain, unwanted noise, so on and so forth. This is about the first time I'd make an absolute sort of exception to those statements. This is peerless to listen to with a turntable over headphones, just as peerless as it is over loudspeakers. It's really, really, really something. Now, the nature of this really something is, of course, that it costs £11,000. I don't doubt for a second that there are integrated amplifiers for less than £11,000, particularly if you don't need a phono stage, which can get to where the Luxman's measured performance is. How much this amplifier appeals to you comes down to items that we discussed in that podcast. This device makes you feel special. It makes you aware that there is a world of engineering and craftsmanship beyond the prosaic putting it in a box and making it sure it doesn't electrocute you. And people ascribe different values to that. I'm a sucker for these things. I've covered this many times before. I am fully on board with going that extra mile to make something feel exceptional and to make it feel like something that isn't mass produced. I mean, to all intents and purposes, this is mass produced, although I don't think they're knocking them out by the thousands a day. It just congratulates you on the money that you've spent. You don't have the enormous buyer's remorse that often accompanies big ticket purchases when you take this thing out of the box. I mean, it's a triple layered box. The box in itself is something of an engineering masterpiece and you could probably live in it, but everything about this makes you feel that you did the right thing. And I would understand, I completely understand if you'd go for it. I'd be inclined, if I was shopping for a product of this nature, to put it right at the top of the pack. In some ways, I prefer what Luxman has done to Macintosh's combination of VU meters and displays and building every single input known to man in there. It's an amplifier for all seasons, but it doesn't necessarily feel as honed and as focused as the L-509Z does. So you pays your money, you takes your choice. I happen to love the aesthetic. It is very large, there's no getting around that, but I think it's elegant. I think it'll sit in most spaces and not frighten the horses. That's when you turn it up, that's when it frightens the horses. I'm £10,900 short to buying this, but I could understand why you do it. I think it's an absolutely outstanding product. I think it embodies everything that Luxman is about. There will be more, as I say, thoughts on sound quality, how I tested it, what I tested it with in the written review, so please do check that out. If you've enjoyed this ode to Japanese over-engineering, well, thank you very much. I'm doing my best to say less, repeat myself less. We're getting there. I've got more notes, they're off to one side, which is why I sort of stare in that direction from time to time. There will be more of these videos. Do leave comments and don't forget to like and subscribe. I've been Ed Selley. Thank you very much for your time and we'll see you later.